When Emeka Okafor stepped off the plane at Murtala Muhammad International Airport in Lagos, he was not the same man who had left 11 years ago. He had left with nothing but a small black bag, a borrowed suit, and a prayer his mother had whispered into his ear at the gate. He returned with a net worth of over 4 billion naira, a reputation that preceded him across 3 continents, and a heart full of promises he had made to the people he loved most. He had pictured this moment 10,000 times in the quiet of foreign hotel rooms. He had imagined his wife Ada running toward him across a compound. He had imagined his mother's face crumpling with joy at the sight of him. He had imagined the smell of his mother's cooking drifting through the gate before he even stepped inside. He had imagined laughter. He had imagined tears of happiness. He had imagined everything. He had mentally rehearsed what he would say. He had planned the gifts he was bringing: a silk wrapper for Ada, a gold bracelet for Mama Ngozi, a toy car for the child of his cousin Obiora who had watched over the household in his absence. But the moment Emeka Okafor's driver turned onto the street where his family home stood in the Surulere district of Lagos, something shifted in his chest. Something cold and quiet moved through him. The street looked the same narrow road, the same open gutters, the same corner shop where he had bought chinchin as a child. But the house was dark. Not the darkness of evening. It was 2 in the afternoon, and the Lagos sun was blazing without mercy. It was the darkness of a place that had been left alone for a very long time. The iron gate was rusted at the hinges. The compound walls were cracked in long diagonal lines, the kind of cracks that come when a building is left unattended for years. Weeds had swallowed the flower beds his mother had tended every morning for 30 years. The same beds where she had grown her peppers and her scent leaf and her stubborn yellow flowers that bloomed even in dry season. Emeka stepped out of the car slowly, his Italian shoes pressing into soil that was dry and neglected. He stood at the gate of his family home, the gate he had walked through 10,000 times as a boy, and felt the ground shift beneath him. This was not what he had imagined. This was not what he had been told. And before this day was over, Emeka Okafor would discover that the people he trusted with his love, his money, and his family had constructed an entire world of lies while he was 10,000 kilometers away. What he found behind those rusted gates would break him open. And what he did next would change everything. Hello friends, before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We love hearing from viewers around the world. Now let us begin the story. The man's name was Emeka Okafor. Today he was successful and respected, a name spoken in the same breath as the great industrialists of Lagos, a man whose construction company had built roads and bridges across West Africa, a man who had sat in boardrooms in Dubai, London, and Nairobi and held his own with people who had been born into the kind of wealth he was still learning to carry. But many years ago life was very different. Emeka grew up in the Ajigunle neighborhood of Lagos, one of the most densely populated districts in the city, where buildings leaned on each other for support, where children played in streets that flooded every rainy season, and where every family knew the weight of surviving month to month without a safety net beneath them. His father, Chukwemeka Sr., had been a bus driver for the state transport company, a man of great dignity and very little money. He drove the same route for 22 years, ferrying civil servants and market women and students from Oshodi to Lagos Island and back again, navigating the same traffic, the same broken roads, the same human tide of a city that never stopped moving. He never complained. He wore his uniform with pride, kept it pressed, kept the buttons polished, tied his tie even on days when the inside of that bus was like a furnace. He polished his shoes every morning even when there was no food in the house. He had a dignity that poverty could not touch. And Emeka watched his father carefully and learned something that would stay with him forever. That a man's character is built not in comfort, but in difficulty. Despite the hardship, Emeka never stopped dreaming of a better future. He studied by lantern light when the electricity went out, which was often, sometimes 3-4 days at a stretch. He carried his textbooks wrapped in a plastic bag through streets that flooded knee-deep during the rains. He sat for every examination with the intensity of someone who understood that his pencil was the only ladder he had. He did not go out with the other boys on weekends. He did not go to parties. He sat with his books and his ambition and his father's example, and he worked. His teachers called him gifted. His neighbors called him serious. His mother called him her miracle. And when he won a partial scholarship to study civil engineering at the University of Lagos, the entire street celebrated like it was Christmas morning. Women brought food to the house. The men from the compound next door brought palm wine. Even the landlord, a man not known for warmth, came to shake Emeka's father's hand. Emeka Okafor was 22 years old, full of fire, and completely unaware of what life still had in store for him. The person who believed in Emeka most fiercely, who poured her entire life into the vessel of his future, was his mother, a woman the whole neighborhood simply called Mama Ngozi. Mama Ngozi was a small woman with large hands roughened by years of selling akara and pap at the junction every morning before 5 o'clock, hands that had scrubbed other people's floors and braided other people's hair and sewn other people's clothes, all so that her son could sit in a classroom and have a future she never got to have. She had not finished secondary school herself. She had left school at 15 to help care for her younger siblings, and she had carried that unfinished dream in a quiet part of herself for the rest of her life. She never spoke of it with bitterness. But she had decided at some point that she never announced, that her child would finish what she had started. Her child would go further than she could dream. She worked day and night to support Emeka. Sometimes she went hungry so he could eat. There were mornings when Emeka woke to find his mother already gone, before the sun had risen, her wrapper still damp from washing the night before, her coal pot already burning at the junction where she set up her akara stand. She never told him how close they were to the edge. She smiled when she came home. She laughed when they ate together, even when the meal was just EBA and watery egusi. She sang when she thought he was asleep. She kept the house clean and the spirit of the family intact through a kind of determined cheerfulness that only a mother in her situation can sustain. She worked long hours under the Lagos sun just to pay his school fees, just to keep him in shoes, just to make sure that whatever her son lacked, he would never lack belief. She never complained. Not once. She always believed that her child would succeed one day. And on the day Emeka graduated from university, top of his department, a distinction on his final project, a firm handshake from the dean in front of the whole assembly, Mama Ngozi stood in the crowd in a dress she had saved for 3 years to buy. She stood very still while everyone else around her cheered. And she wept. Not from sadness. From the deep, aching relief of a woman who had carried something heavy for a very long time and had finally been allowed to set it down. Emeka saw her weeping from across the courtyard. He walked straight to her, ignoring the crowd, ignoring his classmates and their cameras and their noise, and he held his mother in his arms for a long time. He whispered into her ear, "I will never forget what you have done for me. Everything I do from here, I do for you." He meant every word. He would spend the next 11 years trying to honor that promise. And the tragedy was that the betrayal he never saw coming would use his love for her as a weapon against him. It was in his final year at university that Emeka met Ada. Ada was studying economics at the same institution. A quiet, composed young woman from Enugu State who spoke deliberately, thought carefully, and laughed in a way that made everyone around her feel like they had said something brilliant. She was not loud. She was not flashy. She was the kind of woman whose beauty settled over you slowly, like light changing in an afternoon room. You would look up one day and realize you had been watching her without knowing it. Emeka fell for her completely. They started as study partners. Two people who found the library comfortable, who preferred the company of ideas to the noise of the campus social scene. They studied together in the evenings. They argued about economic theories and engineering philosophy and the future of Nigeria with equal passion. They walked along the campus paths at sunset talking about everything, their families, their dreams, what kind of life they wanted to build. Ada told him she wanted to teach. She wanted to open a school one day for children in low-income communities, children like the one she had grown up around in Enugu, children with enough intelligence to build the world but not enough resources to get a start. Emeka told her he wanted to build things, roads, bridges, houses, things that would stand after he was gone. They were, in this way, perfectly matched. Two people who had been taught by difficult lives to believe that the point of making something of yourself was to make something for others. They were married in a small ceremony in Lagos 2 years after graduation. It was not an elaborate wedding. They could not afford elaborate. But Mama Ngozi made sure it was beautiful. She organized the food herself. She borrowed chairs from 3 neighbors. She decorated the compound with Ankara fabric tied between the trees. And she tied Ada's wrapper herself on the wedding morning, with the careful hands of a woman welcoming a new daughter into her home. She told Ada with great seriousness, "That boy is made of gold. You just need someone to believe in him. Will you believe in him?" Ada looked at Mama Ngozi steadily and said, with everything I have. And so the Okafor family grew by one. They were not rich. They were not struggling. They were in that fragile place in between, the place where a wrong turn can take everything, or the right door can open into a completely different life. They did not know yet which kind of door was coming. As time passed, new people entered Emeka's world. Some were kind. Others had different intentions. One of them would soon change the course of his family's life forever. Her name was Chisum. She was Ada's younger sister, 4 years Ada's junior, and in almost every visible way her opposite. Where Ada was measured, Chisum was impulsive. Where Ada was content with simplicity, Chisum burned for status. Where Ada found joy in people, Chisum found opportunity in them. She was beautiful, undeniably so. She had a way of walking into a room that made people turn. She dressed well even when she could not afford to, an extraordinary talent that involves sacrifice and calculation that most people do not see. She laughed loudly and touched people's arms when she spoke to them and made everyone feel like they were the most important person in the space. She was excellent at making people feel seen. It was perhaps her most dangerous quality. But behind that smile was a heart that cared deeply about money and status. Chisum had grown up in the same household as Ada but had absorbed a completely different lesson from their shared poverty. Where Ada had looked at their mother's sacrifices and resolved to be a person who built things for others, Chisum had looked at that same poverty and resolved simply to never experience it again, by any means available to her. Where Ada had learned to give, Chisum had learned to take. Where Ada had learned patience, Chisum had learned to move before the opportunity closed. At first, Chisum seemed kind and genuinely supportive. She attended Emeka and Ada's wedding and cried at all the right moments. She visited them on weekends and helped Ada in the kitchen and played the role of devoted younger sister with convincing warmth. She brought small gifts. She asked Emeka about his work with what seemed like real interest. She told Ada she was proud of her. Her true nature would only reveal itself much later, when proximity to money and the absence of the man who owned it created a window she decided to climb through. But the seed of who Chisum really was had already been planted long before that, and it was waiting for the right conditions to grow. Then one day something unexpected happened. Emeka received an opportunity that could change his life forever. It came through a man named Mr. Babatunde Adeyemi, a senior partner at an international construction consultancy with offices in Abuja, London, and Dubai, a man with a long reach and a sharp eye for engineering talent. Adeyemi had seen Emeka's work on a road rehabilitation project in Ogun State, a project Emeka had managed with such precision, such attention to detail, and such insistence on quality that it had come in 3 weeks early and under budget. In a sector where cutting corners was the norm and padding invoices was practically a tradition, Emeka Okafor had done something radical. He had been honest. He had refused bribes from subcontractors, twice. He had flagged poor quality materials before they were laid. He had sent reports back to the client that were accurate even when accuracy was inconvenient. Adeyemi had heard about all of this through channels. He had made quiet inquiries. And then he had flown to Lagos specifically to meet the man responsible. Over a long meal at a hotel in Victoria Island, he offered Emeka a senior engineering position at the firm's Dubai office. A role that would expose him to billion-naira infrastructure projects across the Gulf, international clients, and a salary that made Emeka's hand tremble slightly as he read the figure on the printed offer letter. It was a chance to travel far away and build a better future. But it meant leaving home for many years. Emeka sat with that offer for a week. He said nothing to anyone except Ada. He sat with it in silence. He sat with it in prayer. He turned it over every way, looking for the angle at which it stopped being what it appeared to be. He talked to Ada for long hours in their small living room, the two of them facing each other across the table, the offer letter between them like a thing that was both a gift and a threat. Ada told him to go. She said it clearly, without drama, without the kind of resentment that she would have been entitled to feel. She said, "This is what we have been working toward." Mama Ngozi told him to go too. She held his face in her large, rough hands and told him that his father would have been proud, and she said it without tears, which told Emeka everything about the effort it cost her. And so Emeka Okafor packed a single large suitcase, kissed his wife on the forehead for a long time, held his mother until she gently pushed him away, and walked onto a plane bound for Dubai. He was 31 years old. He did not know it would be 11 years before he would stand on Lagos soil again. Before leaving, Emeka made important promises. He sat with Ada in their bedroom the night before his flight, the last night they would spend in that room together for many years, and he held both her hands in his and looked at her with the full weight of everything he felt. He promised to take care of his family. He promised they would never suffer again. He meant it the way a man means something when he believes completely in his own ability to keep his word. He set up a monthly transfer, a substantial sum, more than enough to cover all household expenses, medication for Mama Ngozi, maintenance of the house, and still leave something over, to a bank account he opened in Ada's name. He called his cousin Obiora, a man he had known since they were boys running the same streets in Ajigunle, a man he trusted with the specific trust of shared history, and arranged for Obiora to oversee the household. To be available. To be a presence. To be the cousin of a man who was far away but had not forgotten. He sat with Mama Ngozi on the veranda the evening before his flight and they talked for a long time. He promised her she would never want for anything. He promised to call every week. He promised to send money beyond the monthly transfer whenever she needed it for her health, her comfort, anything at all. He promised to come back. He promised that one day they would all sit together. Him, Ada, Mama Ngozi, perhaps children by then, and look back at these hard years and understand that every sacrifice had been worth it. Mama Ngozi listened to all of it without interrupting. Then she said, "I will be here when you get back. Go and do what you were made to do." Ada stood at the door of their compound the morning he left and watched his taxi until it turned the corner and disappeared into the Lagos morning. She did not know it then. But that was the last normal morning of her life for a very long time. At first, everything seemed normal. Emeka called every Sunday from Dubai just as he had promised. His voice coming through the phone slightly distant, slightly tinny, but unmistakably him. The money arrived in Ada's account at the start of every month, reliable as sunrise. Ada and Mama Ngozi settled into a quiet routine. Church on Sundays, market on Tuesdays, evenings sitting together on the veranda as the neighborhood sounds washed over them. Cousin Obiora visited on weekends and checked that the generator was maintained, that the roof was intact, that the compound walls were sound. For the first year, everything held. But slowly things began to change. It started with Chisum moving in. She had lost her job at a travel agency in Ikeja. Let go, she said, because the company was downsizing. She needed somewhere to stay while she figured things out. Just for a few weeks, she said. Ada, being Ada, opened the door without hesitation. Chisum arrived with 3 bags, a box of pastries from a bakery in Ikeja, and a smile that filled the compound. She settled into the spare room like she had always intended to be there. In those early weeks, she was genuinely helpful. She cooked. She cleaned. She kept Mama Ngozi company on the days when Ada was out. She made everyone laugh. The weeks became months. Nobody said anything. But slowly, the warmth that Chisum had brought with her began to transform into something else. Something that did not yet have a name but had a temperature. At first the changes were small and easy to explain away. Chisum began answering the house phone before Ada could reach it. Just being helpful, she said. She began collecting the post from the gate each morning. Just keeping things tidy, she said. She began asking questions about the bank account, how much came in, when it arrived, what it was being spent on. Ada explained. Chisum listened with apparent concern. She offered opinions. She suggested that Ada was managing things a little too loosely. Ada thought nothing of it. Chisum was her sister. Chisum was family. Then one afternoon, while the two of them were sorting through a box of documents that had accumulated on the table, Chisum saw the bank statement. She held it for only a moment before handing it back. But in that moment she had seen the monthly transfer amount. She had seen the balance. And something in Chisum's face changed. A change so small and so fast that Ada missed it entirely. But it was there. The calculation had begun. Within 3 months, Chisum was making suggestions about taking over the financial management of the household. She said Ada was too soft with money. She said she herself had experience managing budgets from her time at the travel agency. She offered to help, to be practical, to be organized, to lighten Ada's load. Ada resisted. But Chisum was persistent in the way that water is persistent. Patient, finding every crack, wearing away resistance not through force but through relentless return. Rules were made. Subtle ones at first. Requests that sounded like suggestions. Suggestions that became the new normal before Ada fully registered the change. Respect turned into control. And the person who suffered the most was the one who loved Emeka the most. Years passed. While Emeka worked hard and became successful far away, while his reputation grew, while his company expanded from a staff of 12 to a staff of 300, while his name appeared in trade publications and on panels at international conferences, something terrible was happening back home. By the third year of Emeka's absence, Chisum had effectively taken control of the household finances. She had done it the way clever thieves do, gradually, with justifications that seemed reasonable in the moment, each step small enough to step over without alarm. She had convinced Ada to add her as a signatory to the account. For convenience, she had said, in case of emergencies when Ada was unavailable. Within 6 months of being added to the account, Chisum had begun redirecting funds. Small amounts at first. Amounts that could be explained as household expenses. Then the amounts grew. The explanations became thinner. The pace of withdrawal increased. She had opened a separate personal account at a different bank. She began investing in properties, not in the family's name, not for Ada or Mama Ngozi, but in her own name for herself. A plot in Aja. A small flat in Lekki. A partnership in a clothing business in Surulere run by a friend. She was building a life. A whole parallel life, using money that belonged to the Okafor family. Meanwhile, the family home began to deteriorate. The roof in the second bedroom developed a leak that was never repaired. When the rains came, Ada moved Mama Ngozi's things to drier parts of the house and put out a bucket. The kitchen wall cracked. The gate hinges rusted until the gate no longer closed properly. Emeka's monthly transfer was arriving. But it was leaving just as quickly into accounts that Ada had no full sight of. Ada discovered what was happening in the 4th year. She had gone to the bank herself, an unusual thing since Chisum had taken over the bank runs, and asked to see the transaction history on the account. The woman at the counter had handed her the printout. Ada had stood at the counter and read it 3 times. She had taken it home and spread it on the table and sat with it for an hour. Then she called Chisum into the room. Chisum sat down and looked at the printout. She did not flinch. She did not apologize. She did not perform any of the guilt that Ada had been prepared for. Instead, she looked at Ada with cold, steady eyes and said something that Ada would never forget. If you tell Emeka, I will tell him things about you that will destroy your marriage. I have been keeping records. I've been collecting things. You have no idea what I can do to your life. Ada stared at her sister for a long time. She understood in that moment that the person she had let into her home was capable of something she had never fully prepared for. She thought about what it would mean to expose this. She thought about Emeka reading her name alongside a scandal. She thought about the distance between them, 10,000 kilometers, and how distance distorts everything, how a lie told from far away can sound like the truth. And so, out of fear and out of the particular kind of love that makes people protect others at great cost to themselves, Ada remained silent. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself she would find a way out. But Chisum's grip on the household tightened with every year that passed. By the 6th year, most of the money Emeka sent was disappearing before Ada could access it for the things the family actually needed. The house fell into serious disrepair. There was no money for maintenance. There was barely enough for food some weeks. Mama Ngozi's health began to deteriorate, as older bodies do, with requirements that increase as the years stack up. She needed specific medication. She needed regular doctor visits. She needed a diet that cost money to maintain. The medication became inconsistent. The doctor visits stopped. Ada went to the market and discovered that the market women who had once extended her credit, who had known the Okafor family for years, now turned away from her. News travels in a Lagos neighborhood. People knew something was wrong even if they did not know exactly what. And through all of it, when Emeka called, once a week, then once a fortnight, then once a month as the demands of his growing company consumed more and more of his time, Ada told him everything was fine. She told him the house was fine. She told him Mama Ngozi was fine. She told him she was fine. She told him about the weather. She told him about a funny thing the neighbor's goat had done. She kept her voice light and warm and gave him nothing that would cause him to worry. She carried the full weight of the truth alone, in silence, the way people do when they love someone so much that protecting them feels more important than surviving. In the 8th year, Mama Ngozi had a stroke. Ada found her in the morning, slumped in her chair on the veranda, her left side unresponsive, her face pulled slightly to one side, her prayer beads on the floor where they had fallen from her hand. Ada called for help. She managed, with the assistance of 2 neighbors, to get Mama Ngozi into a taxi and to the government hospital on the main road. She called Chisum in a panic. Chisum was in Abuja that weekend, at a real estate conference, spending money that belonged to the Okafor family, sleeping in a hotel room paid for with the Okafor family's naira. She said she would come back as soon as she could. She came back 2 days later. Mama Ngozi had survived. The doctors said she was stable but weakened. She would need care, medication, and a safe and comfortable home environment for her recovery. What she got was a house with a leaking roof, a damp bedroom, unrepaired cracks in the walls, and a daughter-in-law doing everything she could with almost nothing. In the 9th year, Ada discovered she was pregnant. The child was Emeka's, conceived during his one brief visit home in year 7, a visit that had been warm and close, full of the love that 11 years of distance had not managed to extinguish. That visit had given them both something to hold on to. But by the time Ada confirmed the pregnancy at a clinic, the family home had become genuinely unlivable. The roof had collapsed in the front room entirely during the last heavy rainfall. The structure itself was now compromised. Chisum, sensing that her entire scheme might unravel if Emeka came home to a disaster, sensing that she needed to remove the evidence of her mismanagement by removing the people who were living in it, had done something extraordinary in its cruelty. She had approached the landlord of a neighboring property, a distant relative of the Okafor family who had nursed a long-standing grudge against Mama Ngozi over a boundary dispute from many years earlier. She had told him a story. She had shown him false documents. She had convinced him that the property had been transferred to her custody and that the current occupants were living there without authorization. The landlord had cooperated eagerly. Together, they had changed the locks on the main gate while Ada was at the clinic and Mama Ngozi was resting inside. Ada and Mama Ngozi returned home one Thursday evening. Ada from the clinic, Mama Ngozi from a brief visit to a neighbor, and found the gate sealed with a new chain and padlock. There was a notice on the gate. It said the property was under new management. Ada read the notice twice. She read it the way you read something that your brain refuses to process. She stood at the gate of the house where she had built her life, where she had waited 11 years for her husband to come home, with her mother-in-law beside her and her unborn child inside her, holding a plastic bag of medication, and she understood that she had nowhere to go. She stood there for a long moment. And then a voice came from the compound next door. It was Mama Titi, an elderly woman who had known the Okafor family since before Emeka was born, who had watched him grow up, who had attended his parents' wedding reception in that very compound. Mama Titi had a room at the back of her compound, a storeroom really that she used for keeping extra things. It was small. It had one window. It had not been used as a living space in many years. She opened it without being asked. She cleared it herself that evening, swept it, moved the boxes, rolled in a mattress from her own house. She hung a curtain over the window. She said only, "Come inside. You cannot stand on the street in your condition." And that was where Ada went. That was where Ada spent the final months of her pregnancy. In a borrowed room in a neighbor's compound, in the neighborhood where her husband had grown up and where everyone still referred to the Okafor house as the Okafor house even after everything that had happened to it. That was where Mama Ngozi slept on a mattress on the floor, her prayer beads in her hands, whispering every night for her son to come home. That was the truth that existed on the other side of the polished life Emeka Okafor believed his family was living. And none of it, not one word, not one hint, had reached him. After 11 years, Emeka Okafor finally returned home. The decision had come suddenly, triggered not by a plan but by a letter. His company had just closed a major contract, a bridge project in River State worth 800 million naira, the largest single project in his company's history. He had been preparing to celebrate. He had been thinking about expanding his team, opening a Lagos office, perhaps finally coming home for more than a brief visit. Then the letter arrived. It came through his company's Lagos correspondence address, an address he maintained for administrative purposes, a detail that Chisum had not thought to intercept. It was from a government hospital in Lagos. It confirmed that a patient named Ngozi Okafor had been treated there 8 months ago for a stroke-related episode and had been discharged into the care of a family member. Emeka read that letter in his office in Dubai and sat very still for a long time. His mother had been in a hospital in Lagos 8 months ago. He had not known. He had called Ada that same evening. The line played a recorded message telling him the number was no longer in service. He had called the house landline. It rang and rang. No answer. He had called Chisum. Chisum answered on the fourth ring, her voice smooth and composed. A voice that had had 11 years of practice at being smooth and composed on the phone with Emeka. She told him everything was fine. She said Ada's phone had developed a fault and she was waiting to get it repaired. She said Mama Ngozi had recovered fully from a small health scare months ago. She said he should not worry. Emeka told Chisum he was coming home. He heard something in the pause that followed, a pause of a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but there. He had been an engineer his whole career. He had been trained to notice the place where something was not quite right, the small variance, the reading that was slightly off, the detail that did not match the model. He noticed the pause. Chisum said, "Of course. We will be happy to see you." Emeka booked a flight for the following week. He bought gifts on his last day in Dubai. A silk wrapper for Ada. A gold bracelet for Mama Ngozi. A football for his cousin Obiora's son. He sat on the plane with a heaviness in his chest that he could not explain and told himself it was just the strangeness of returning after so long. When the car turned onto his street and he saw the state of the house, the rusted gate, the cracked walls, the weeds where his mother's garden used to be, the heaviness became something else entirely. Something was wrong. Something was missing. And soon he would discover the truth. Emeka stepped through the broken gate of the family compound and stood in the overgrown yard. He knocked on the front door. No answer. He called out Ada's name. The sound of his own voice in that silent yard felt strange and wrong. He walked around the side of the house and found the back door sealed with a padlock on a chain that he had never seen before. A lock that belonged to someone else. He stepped back and looked at the house from the yard. 11 years of his money. 11 years of monthly transfers. 11 years of promises to take care of his family. And the house looked like it had been abandoned for years. His driver stood by the car, uncertain, watching. Emeka walked out of the compound and knocked on the gate of the house next door. Mama Titi's gate. He had known Mama Titi his entire life. She had attended his parents' wedding. She had celebrated with the street when he won his scholarship. She was the kind of woman a Lagos neighborhood builds itself around. Present, constant, old enough to remember everything that had ever happened on this street. When Mama Titi opened the gate and saw Emeka Okafor standing in front of her, her face did something complicated. She looked at him for a moment, taking him in, this man who had left as a young husband and was returning as someone with gray beginning at his temples and the posture of someone who had been carrying a large company on his back for 11 years. Then her face did the thing that faces do when they are holding something that is about to come out. She turned toward the back of her compound. She called Ada's name. The sound Emeka heard next. Slow footsteps, careful footsteps. The careful footsteps of a woman who is 8 months pregnant and has learned to move through a small space without disturbing anything, was the sound that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Ada appeared in the doorway of the small room at the back of Mama Titi's compound. She was 8 months pregnant. She was thin everywhere except the roundness of her belly. She was wearing a house dress that was frayed at the hem. Her hair was wrapped simply in a piece of fabric. She looked at Emeka. And she put her hand over her mouth. Emeka stared at his wife, at the woman he had promised would never suffer, at the woman who had told him week after week in a warm and steady voice that everything was fine, and felt the ground tilt completely beneath him. He looked past her into the small room. He saw the mattress on the floor. He saw Mama Ngozi lying on it. His mother, this woman who had sold Accra at 5 in the morning so he could sit in a classroom, looking back at him with eyes that contained 11 years of things she had not said. He looked back at Ada. He said her name. Just her name. And she began to weep. Not quietly. With the full sound of someone who has been holding something enormous for a very long time. The truth finally came out, all of it, every layer of it. And it shattered his heart. When they finally held each other, the weight of years came down all at once. Emeka held Ada in the middle of Mama Titi's compound, his hand pressing against her back, his face pressed into her hair, and he wept in a way he had not allowed himself to weep since his father's funeral. He wept for the years he had not known. He wept for every Sunday phone call where Ada had told him everything was fine, and he had believed her, and put the phone down and gone back to his drawings and his meetings and his contracts. He wept for the image of his wife, heavy with his child, sleeping on a borrowed mattress in a neighbor's storeroom. He wept for his mother lying on the floor 10 steps away from the home she had built her life in. Ada held him back just as tightly. And then slowly, in the quiet that follows the first wave of that kind of grief, the words began to come. Ada told him everything. She told him about Chisum. She told him about the bank account. She told him about the 4th year, when she discovered what was happening, and the threat that had kept her silent. She told him about the gate being locked. She told him about the night she stood outside with Mama Ngozi and the bag of medication and understood she had nowhere to go. She told him about Mama Titi opening the door. She told him she was sorry she had not said anything sooner. He told her she had nothing to be sorry for. She told him she had been afraid. He told her that fear was finished now. Then he went to his mother. He crossed the small compound and knelt beside the mattress where Mama Ngozi lay. He took her hands in his. Her hands were thinner than he remembered. They felt like paper over bone. These hands that had sold Accra at 5 in the morning, that had braided other people's hair, that had pressed against his face the morning he left for Dubai and pushed him gently toward his future. She looked at her son. For a long moment she only looked at him. Then she said, "You came back." Emeka nodded. He could not speak. He stayed kneeling beside her for a long time. Tears flowed freely among all of them. And for the first time in 11 years the full truth was spoken. Within 24 hours of arriving in Lagos, Emeka had arranged for Ada and Mama Ngozi to be moved into a fully serviced apartment in Victoria Island. He paid for 3 months in advance. He arranged for a domestic worker. He arranged for a nurse to come each morning to check on Mama Ngozi. He sat with Ada that first night, in a proper room at a proper table with food that had been prepared by someone else for a change, and he listened. He listened for 3 hours. Every detail. Every year. Every transaction Ada could remember. Every threat Chisum had made. Every withdrawal. Every lie. He listened without interrupting. He listened with his jaw tight and his hands folded still on the table in front of him. When Ada finished, the room was very quiet for a long time. Then Emeka picked up his phone and made a call. He called Chisum. He kept his voice completely level. He told her he was in Lagos. He told her he had spoken to Ada. He told her he knew everything. The pause on the other end of the phone lasted 4 full seconds. Then Chisum said, "Emeka, you need to understand that things were very complicated here. Ada was not managing the household well. I was only trying to help." Emeka said nothing. Chisum continued. The story shifted and reshaped itself as she spoke. Excuses were made and discarded and replaced with new ones. Blame was shifted from herself to Ada, to the economy, to the difficulty of managing a household without the man of the house present. Emeka listened to all of it. Then he told Chisum to come to his hotel the following morning at 9 o'clock. She arrived exactly on time. She arrived dressed well, composed, carrying herself with the particular confidence of a woman who had survived tight spots before. But she had not expected to walk into a room with Emeka's lawyer sitting at the table. She had not expected the printed bank statements spread across the surface, years of them, page after page, the full paper trail of exactly what she had done with the Okafor family's money. She had not expected the written testimony Ada had given, witnessed and signed. She had not expected Emeka to have moved so quickly, with such precision, with such complete preparation. Chisum's composure cracked in stages. First the smile, then the steadiness of voice, then the composure itself. She tried every tactic she had. She tried calm explanation. She tried righteous indignation, suggesting that she was being unfairly treated, that she had done her best in a difficult situation. Then she tried tears. She wept. She said she had been struggling. She said the money she had taken was not theft, it was survival. She said she was family and family owed each other forgiveness. Emeka watched her and felt something very cold and very clear inside him. He told Chisum that she had taken money that belonged to his family over 11 years. He told her the total amount which his accountant had calculated from the bank records, more than 12 million naira. He told her that she had left his pregnant wife without a home. He told her she had left his sick mother sleeping on a borrowed mattress on a neighbor's floor. He told her the matter had been formally referred to the police. And he told her that she was no longer welcome in his life, his home or his family. The truth could no longer be hidden. Chisum left that hotel room a different woman from the one who had walked in. That evening, after Chisum left the hotel, Emeka sat alone in his room for a long time. He did not call anyone. He did not order food. He sat in the chair by the window and looked out at the lights of Victoria Island spreading toward the water, and he thought about 11 years. He thought about every phone call. Every Sunday he had picked up the phone and heard Ada's voice, warm and steady, telling him everything was fine. He thought about how much he had trusted that voice. He thought about how he had worked. The early mornings, the late nights, the projects that had stretched across months and years, and all of it had been done with the knowledge that his family was being taken care of. That knowledge had been the ground he stood on. And it had been false. But Emeka was not, by nature, a man who stayed long in grief. He was a builder. He was an engineer. When something was broken, he wanted to understand exactly how it had broken. Every joint, every failure point, every place where the structure had given way so that he could build it properly this time. He picked up the phone and called his Lagos lawyer. For the next 3 days, the two of them worked together with focused intensity. They obtained full transaction records from both banks. They engaged a forensic accountant to trace every withdrawal, every transfer, every naira that had left the Okafor family accounts over 11 years and followed its path to wherever Chisum had sent it. The picture that emerged was worse than even Ada's account had suggested. Chisum had been systematic. She had not simply taken money when she felt like it. She had studied the account, understood the rhythms of the incoming transfers, and built a withdrawal pattern that was designed to stay just below the threshold that might trigger a bank alert. She had done this for years with the patience of someone who believed she would never be caught. The forensic accountant presented the final figures to Emeka on a printed spreadsheet. 12,460,000 naira. Emeka looked at the number for a long time. He thought about Ada standing at a locked gate, 7 months pregnant, holding a bag of medication. He thought about Mama Ngozi on a borrowed mattress on a neighbor's floor. He thought about the leaking roof, the disconnected phone, the market women who had stopped extending credit. He thanked the accountant and told him to submit the full report to the police. He also made another call, to cousin Obiora. Obiora had been the man entrusted with watching over the household while Emeka was away. Obiora had been present, or was supposed to have been present. What Emeka discovered in that conversation was something that added a different kind of pain to an already painful week. Obiora had been managing the relationship with Chisum, not watching against her. He had been charmed slowly over years. Chisum had given him small gifts. She had flattered him. She had made him feel like a trusted ally rather than a watchdog. She had made it easy for him to believe that she was managing things well, and he had chosen to believe what was easy. Obiora wept on the phone when he understood what had happened. He said he had not known. He said he had asked and been told everything was fine. Emeka was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Ada asked for help and no one was listening. That will not happen again. He told Obiora he did not hate him. But he told him that trust, once broken by negligence, takes a long time to rebuild. He told him to think carefully about the difference between being comfortable and being present. Then he ended the call. The police moved on Chisum's case within the week. She had not left Lagos. Perhaps she believed that leaving would look like guilt, or perhaps she believed she could still manage the situation. She was wrong on both counts. In the end, actions had consequences. The police investigation was swift once Emeka's legal team presented the documentation. Chisum was formally charged with fraud and criminal diversion of funds. The properties she had purchased with the diverted money were traced through land registry records and through the paper trail of transactions that her own financial activity had created. The plot in Aja, the flat in Lekki, the investment in the Surulere clothing business. All of it was seized pending the investigation. The distant relative who had helped her change the locks on the family home was questioned by the police. He cooperated fully, offered to return the keys, and was last seen quietly relocating his own family to another part of Lagos. Chisum's lawyer negotiated hard. In the end, a settlement was reached that kept the matter from going fully to trial in exchange for full repayment of the diverted sum. Chisum liquidated the assets that remained in her name. She borrowed from people who had previously admired her success, who now understood, as the story spread through the social circles she had inhabited, exactly how that success had been built. In 18 months, the full amount had been repaid. Chisum was left with nothing that she had not started with. No properties. No investments. No reputation in the circles she had spent 11 years cultivating. No sister. Greed and cruelty destroyed everything she had constructed. The confidence she had built from money that was never hers. The status she had performed with resources that belonged to someone else. The image of a woman of means, assembled carefully over years at enormous cost to the people she was supposed to love. All of it gone. Justice finally prevailed, quietly, fully, without ceremony. After everything that had happened, Emeka focused on what truly mattered. The family home in Surulere was gutted. Not demolished, gutted. Every damaged interior removed, every compromised structure examined, everything that could be saved preserved. Emeka hired a team of his best contractors and visited the site every other day. He supervised the work himself, not because he did not trust his team, but because this was not a professional project. This was his father's house. This was his mother's garden. This was the compound where he had studied by lantern light and dreamed of a different life. He was not going to let strangers rebuild it without him being present. New roof. New walls. New floors. New gate. This time with proper hinges, a proper lock, a gate that would open and close for 100 years. But the same compound. The same address. The same footprint of the house his parents had built their lives in. Because Emeka understood that home is not just a structure. It is the accumulation of everything that has happened within its walls. He was not going to demolish his history. He was going to restore it. 6 months after Emeka's return, Mama Ngozi was moved back into the rebuilt house. She walked through the gate slowly, leaning on Emeka's arm. She walked through each room and touched the walls. She stood in her kitchen and ran her hand along the counter. She walked out to the veranda and sat in the chair that Emeka had found in the original house and had repaired and kept exactly where it had always been. She sat for a long time and looked out at the compound. Clean now, the weeds gone, fresh flowers beginning to establish themselves in the beds along the wall. She held her prayer beads. Then she said, "Your father would have sat here with me tonight." Emeka sat beside her. He said, "I know, Mama." They sat together as the evening came in, and the neighborhood sounds moved around them, and neither of them spoke for a long time. It was, Emeka thought, the most peace he had felt in 11 years. Ada gave birth to a boy 3 weeks after Emeka's return. They named him Chukwemeka Jr., after Emeka's father, the bus driver who had polished his shoes every morning even when there was no food in the house. Emeka was in the room when his son was born. He held his son for the first time, this small, warm, astonishing weight, and felt something that no business achievement had ever come close to giving him. He felt grounded. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Ada recovered slowly and fully. The fear that had lived in her body for 11 years did not leave all at once. That is not how such things work. But it began to loosen the way cold things loosen in warmth, the way held breath is eventually, gradually, released. Emeka made her an appointment with a doctor who specialized in the physical and emotional toll of sustained stress. He attended every appointment he could. He sat beside her. He listened to everything the doctor said and asked careful questions. He cooked for her on evenings when she was tired. Not well at first, but with enough effort that Ada found it funny and then touching and then a kind of joy. He learned, in those months, how to be present in a way that 11 years of distance had not taught him. He also built the school. Ada's school, the one she had dreamed of since they walked on campus paths in the evening and talked about what kind of people they wanted to be. Emeka funded it fully. He registered it. He had his team fit out the building. Ada chose the curriculum, hired the teachers, designed the uniform. It opened in the Ajigunal neighborhood, the neighborhood where Emeka had grown up, where he had studied by lantern light, where he had carried his books in a plastic bag through flooded streets. The school was named after Mama Ngozi. On opening day, the old woman sat in the front row of a small ceremony, surrounded by children in neat uniforms, 100 small faces turned toward the morning. She wept the way she had wept at Emeka's graduation, with the specific, enormous relief of a woman who had believed in something for a very long time and lived to see it arrive. Together, this family began a new chapter filled with peace and dignity. Not the loud, performed peace of people pretending everything is fine. The quiet, earned peace of people who have come through something hard together and chosen each other on the other side. This story reminds us of something important. Never forget the people who stood beside you when you had nothing. Never forget the people who went hungry so you could eat, who believed in you when belief was the only currency they had, who held the life together while you were far away building a future that they trusted you to come back from. Because success means very little if we abandon those who loved us when life was hard. Emeka Okafor came back from 11 years abroad as a billionaire. He had built roads and bridges across 3 countries. He had sat in boardrooms with powerful men. He had a company, a reputation, a name. But the thing that made him a good man was not any of that. It was the moment he knelt on a borrowed mattress and took his mother's thin hands in his. It was the moment he held his wife in a neighbor's compound and told her that fear was finished now. It was the moment he sat beside his mother on the veranda of the restored family house and said, "I know, Mama," and did not need to say anything else. It was the moment he held his son for the first time and understood, completely, what all the work had been for. There is another lesson in this story, and it is a harder one. Betrayal does not always arrive from strangers. It often arrives wearing the face of someone we love. Someone who knows us, who has eaten at our table, who has been trusted with our home while we were away. Chisum was not an enemy who came in from outside. She was family. She was a sister. She was welcomed in. And that is the most painful kind of betrayal. Not the knife from a stranger, but the slow, quiet damage done by someone who smiled while they did it. The lesson is not to distrust everyone. The lesson is to stay connected. Be present. Be curious about the lives of the people you love. Do not let distance, physical or emotional, create a space so large that the people carrying suffering cannot reach you across it. Ask questions. Stay close. Make it easy for the people you love to tell you the truth. And if you are the one carrying the suffering, speak. Speak before the weight becomes unbearable. Silence is not protection. It is isolation dressed up as loyalty. Let the people who love you carry the weight with you. That is what love is for. That is what family is for. That is the whole point. Think also about what this story says about silence. Ada's silence was not weakness. Let that be clear. Ada was a woman in an impossible position, threatened, isolated, far from the person she loved, carrying the weight of a secret that she had been told would destroy everything she had left if she released it. She was not weak. She was surviving under extraordinary pressure with the tools she had. But the silence still cost her enormously. It cost her years. It cost her health. It cost her a home. And the lesson is not to blame Ada for her silence. The lesson is to build the kinds of relationships, the kinds of communication, the kinds of trust, where silence like that is less likely to happen. Where the person you love feels certain enough that you will believe them, strong enough that they do not need to protect you from a truth you need to hear. Emeka was not a bad husband. He worked hard. He sent money. He called as often as he could. But he allowed the distance to become a kind of comfort. He allowed the routine of Ada's calm voice to become the whole picture. He did not ask the harder questions. He did not push past fine. And that is the thing that distance does to love if we are not careful. It gives us a simplified version of the people we love, a version made only of what they choose to transmit, and we can mistake that transmission for the full truth. Presence, real presence, the kind that asks and listens and stays uncomfortable until the real answer comes, is the only antidote to that. Be that kind of presence for the people you love. And when you cannot be physically present, create the conditions that make honesty possible across any distance. One more thing. This story is set in Lagos. The names are Nigerian. The streets are real. But the story itself belongs to everyone. Because betrayal does not belong to one culture. Neither does sacrifice. Neither does the kind of love that keeps going even when keeping going is almost impossible. Every culture has its mom ngozi, the woman who gave everything so her child could have something. Every culture has its Emeka, the person who left home with a dream and came back to find that the home had changed while they were away building it. Every culture has its Chisum, the person who stood close to something generous and beautiful and chose to consume it rather than protect it. And every culture has its Ada, the person who suffered in silence because they loved someone too much to burden them and paid too high a price for that love. These are human stories. They live in every language, every city, every family that has ever been separated by distance and held together by faith. We tell them here, in this African setting, with these Nigerian names, because specificity is what makes a story real. You cannot feel for a character who lives nowhere. You can only feel for a character who lives somewhere, on a specific street, in a specific compound, in a neighborhood where you can almost smell the akara frying before 5 in the morning. That specificity, that realness, is what allows a story told in Lagos to reach someone watching in London or Atlanta or Nairobi and make them think of their own mother, their own silence, their own locked gate. That is what stories are for. That is why we keep telling them. That is why, after everything, Emeka Okafor named a school after his mother and opened its doors in the neighborhood where he grew up. Because the only answer to what was lost is to build something in its place. Something that lasts. Something that stands. Emeka understood this. After everything that had been taken from his family, after the years of lies and the suffering and the locked gates and the borrowed rooms, He did not respond with bitterness. He responded with construction. He rebuilt the house. He opened the school. He sat beside his mother on the veranda and let the evening come in around them. He held his son in a hospital room and gave him the name of a man who had polished his shoes every morning even when there was no food in the house. He chose deliberately to build. And that is the final thing this story teaches. Whatever has been taken from you, by time, by betrayal, by distance, by the cruelty of people who were supposed to love you, the answer is to build. Not to forget. Not to pretend the loss did not happen. But to take what remains and use it. To take the empty compound and plant new flowers in it. To take the borrowed room and turn it into a story that teaches someone something true. To take the name of a man who drove a bus for 22 years with dignity, and put it above the door of a school so that children who never met him can walk through his name every morning on their way to becoming something. That is the answer. It was always the answer. Go well. Take care of your people. And never, never forget where you came from, because the roots are what hold you steady and strong when everything else is moving around you. If you enjoyed this African folktale, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also tell us in the comments what lesson you learned from today's story. We want to know which part of this story moved you the most. Was it the mother who sacrificed everything? Was it the wife who suffered in silence? Was it the moment Emeka came home and found the truth? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. And tell us where you are watching from. We have viewers from Lagos to London, from Accra to Atlanta, from Nairobi to New York, and we love knowing that these stories travel so far. Thank you for watching. Take care of the people you love. And I will see you in the next story.